Hello, welcome to another episode of Painting with Color. Today we're going to look at this painting I did of my husband. It's like a Viking type painting. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. So this first stage here, I already have the background kind of painted and I painted over the lines just with a whitewash and let it dry so that the charcoal pencil color didn't smear anymore. If you're wondering how to get a drawing onto a canvas, if you don't see it up yet, it will be up soon. I'm going to make a video on how I transfer a photograph to the canvas. And it helps a ton when you're doing paintings like this because you want to make sure that you get the eyeballs and the ears and the nose and everything in the right position and the right size so that your face doesn't end up looking really wonky, um, which you could tell from the lower left-hand corner to the upper right. You know, it's not perfect, but it's a painting and you could still tell it's him, so it's good enough. It's good enough for me. Um, so right here, I'm just blocking in some colors. And this one, I'm going to try something different. I try, when I begin to paint in the values, I'm trying to mix my own colors to get like a skin tone color, and it does not turn out well. You will see. I don't know. I just can't mix colors. I've said before I paint out of tubes, and at some point I end up going right back to that. But you're going to see how I go through all of that trials and tribulations and how much the painting actually sucks. So if you want to forward around that part, that's fine because it's about half of the painting is the painting sucking. But this first part is really cool. So I put down a green, and if you watch any of my other videos, you know that I paint in layers. And so what I do is just put down one color that's kind of like a medium, and then I'm going to go in with highlights. And so now I'm just adding in where I see all the lights in the face. And this part doesn't have to be perfect at all. Wherever you see light in the picture, I'm just putting in white right there just to give it a bit of definition. Okay, now I'm going in with a darker blue. It's probably ultramarine blue. And I'm just going to put in some shadow blocking. So wherever I see the dark shadows in the photograph, I'm just going to loosely put those in there. And remember, all of this stuff is going to be painted over at some time. So if you want to follow along and try this painting with me, just be really loose with it during this part because we're just putting in the fundamentals, I would say. You can see I'm kind of even using a pretty large paintbrush for this part. This painting is only 8 by 10, so it's a very tiny painting. And here I switched to a smaller brush, and I'm using a purple color now, and I'm going to go over with some of the even darker areas with this purple color. And I'm going to fill in his irises. He's got, or his whole eye, he's got hazel eyes, but at first I'm going to do them dark, and then I'll go over that again later. So I'm just putting a bit more definition in where the really dark shadows are. honestly, at this stage of the painting, I was like really super happy with it. I was like, wow, this is going to be awesome. Um, but you'll see pretty soon here, I just wanted to chuck it in the trash. You won't see that in a lot of tutorials. A lot of artists will be like, oh, yeah, here's how you do it, how you make it look perfect. But you know what? Sometimes when you're painting, stuff does not end up perfect. It's just, it doesn't come out perfect. You're trying new things, you're trying to get shades. I've never really done a beard like that. And you're just, no, that's just not how life is. I don't know. None of my paintings are perfect right away. So here I'm just kind of putting in some shadows to represent the braids. And we'll go over those a bunch of times so you don't have to worry about being perfect. Okay, so now I'm putting an orange color. It's just like a wash, and I'm putting that over it just to try to give it more of a skin tone color. And this is my first mistake. If I was going to mix my own colors, I probably should have just started with white and went right on it with those colors. But normally I paint in layers where I layer colors on top of colors instead of mixing colors. So that was probably my first mistake. But hey, I gave it a try. So now I'm just putting in some highlights with a light yellow. So I'm putting in these highlights and I'm really trying to define where the light is in the photograph. And the eye on the right, it gave me lots of problems, but I think in the end it turned out pretty good. Um, sometimes when you paint a line, I believe I'm using a flat brush here, a tiny flat brush, and you paint a line and it's just way too thick. And what I'll do is I'll go back over it when I do a different value, like maybe I'll do a medium shadow and I'll take that color that I want to be right next to that line and I'll kind of shave it off a bit and that'll make the lines thinner. And that's how I get thin lines sometimes. But this is still basically an underpainting. I'm just trying to get the values in the way I want them. You'll see me do this a lot in bigger areas. So what I'm doing is you get your brush loaded with a bit of color and then you start to scrub it. And it's like a dry brush technique, kind of. I guess it'll put a lot of color in one spot and then it'll just kind of blend it more by barely brushing over other spots. And it's kind of a neat way to get some texture, and you're not necessarily blending the color, you're just kind of spotting it in other places by scrubbing the brush over it while it still has just a little bit of paint on it. And now I'm going back over some places with thicker paint, so there's a bit more on it, and that'll make the color lighter. If you look at the photograph, he's got these just this ever so slightly light on the lids of his eyes. It's like a hooded eye, and were very difficult to do. But if you end up painting them too thick, you could just go back over it later. What I use is, you'll see me use a tiny little paintbrush, and the handle is like a clear with a bunch of sparkles in it, and that's actually an eyeliner brush. And I got those on Amazon. It came in a pack of 6, and they have different lengths. And I find that really helps with the teeny, 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 tiny lines. I'll point that out when I use it. So as I'm painting, usually I exaggerate a lot of things. So you see that there's a bit of light on his upper lip, and I might make that light really super bright. And then as I paint in more and more layers, it kind of tones it down a bit. So if you put a color down and you think it's a bit too bright or a bit too dark, don't worry about it until you get towards the end of your painting where you think you're almost done. That's when you start toning everything down. I think that painting an ear is like a really good exercise on lights and shadows, because there's so many variations in there. So I think if you ever wanted to practice painting lights and shadows on skin, that's probably just paint an ear. Seriously. So here I want to try to make sure I get some of that skin tone that I made. And this color is pretty yellow. I mean, I'm not liking it at all, but I'm just keep going. But I want to make sure that that color comes through on wherever he has skin. So I'm going to put a bit of it everywhere, even on the shadowy parts, because we'll go back over those. He looks like he has jaundice. Maybe he's a zombie. So with the beard here, I'm putting in some light purple, and his beard is pretty white. It's really gray. So I'm going to you'll see me put lots of different layers on the beard. And whatever color I put in the beard, I try to put it in the hair because usually he doesn't actually have hair. I Photoshop that in. But usually if you have a beard, the hair is oftentimes the same color. So I try to make sure that whatever I put in there, I put it on the top too. And so the hair, since I did Photoshop it, you could see it on the bottom left. That's a Photoshopped photograph of him where I cut him out and it's a different background. And that's not even the clothes he was wearing. I Photoshopped those in. And the light source is a bit different on the hair. It's kind of similar where it would be. And same with the clothes. I picked clothes where the light source was where I didn't have to mess with it that much. So I just have to keep that in mind as I'm painting the hair, that the light is just a bit more, there's more on it forward, but overall I did a pretty good job with picking something where the light source is very similar. And I really like how the back of the hair has a bit light coming out, like there's a backlight, it's reflecting off of something. So I made sure I kept that in throughout the whole painting. You can also see it on just very slightly on the back of the neck, and the shirt has some light back there. So I painted the whole thing as if the light was coming from the front top, and then there's some kind of backlight in the back. So here I'm just putting back in those dark values. I probably painted everything over this painting like 50 times, you'll see. But sometimes you just have to do that, especially, oh, I need my glasses on here. I have to get closer, I can't see. And if you notice when you paint eyes, there's like the shadow right underneath the eyelid, and you always want to make sure that you put that on the eye because some people I think forget, and it makes your eyes look very cartoony. You can see right there I totally messed up and I made that highlight way too thick, but it's okay. We'll go over that again later. Next time, our next color that we do, we'll just tone that down a bit and reshape it. We all make mistakes, especially as tiny painting like this. Sometimes it's really hard to get those details in. Okay, so here I'm trying to get that hood, and I'm trying to leave just a little bit of the darker color so I don't have to repaint that line. But yeah, it kind of doesn't work out too well. But that's okay. We'll go over it again. And with my shadows, that was a dark blue color, and now I'm going back over it with a purple. And I like to use dark blue and dark purples in shadows together because I think it just gives it a little bit of interest. Because if you look at a shadow, especially like on the face or underneath a tree or something like that, there's a lot of different colors and shadows too. I mean, depending on how the light is, sometimes it's all one color, but sometimes you get different variations of shades. And now I'm trying to accentuate the little bags under his eyes, and this is going to look terrible. It's going to look like he was partying all night, but he has to go work at Blockbuster and open in the morning, and he barely got up. But he's there. He's there for work. He's ready to work. He's just not completely there in the head because, he's partying all night. So if you want to paint somebody that had a rough night, then here you go. Just give him those bags under his eyes. Give him some jaundiced skin, a little green in it, look kind of like a zombie. Now I know this part looks terrible when you do the nose, but as you keep going, it starts to balance it all out. You keep adding shadows in other places, and it'll bring the whole thing together. But those deep dark shadows will be covered and just shown to peek out just a little bit. So that's why I over exaggerate everything as I paint. I mean, that would be a pretty cool zombie painting or vampire painting or something. Keith Richards painting. Yeah, that's it. So you can see in the photograph, there's just a bit of shadow to the right of his neck, and then there's shadow to the left, but then there's like a little bit of light in the middle. And I really try to keep that, but I don't think I did. I think I lost it at some point. Have you ever watched Mr. Robot? That's kind of like what this reminds me of, that guy. Like sometimes he just looks like he's, on a deathbed or something. I mean, at this point, it looks like he's in the hospital and he like really needs an IV or something. Now with the beard, even if the beard is really light and white, there are shadows in there, And so I want to keep those shadows going because I know that later this is still an underpainting, and later I'm going to be painting over those. And when I paint the lighter colors, you're going to see it'll help show the lighter colors, and you'll see the shadows underneath it and through it. And I want to add the same colors to the hair. So this is purple and it's really watered down, so it just kind of gives it a wash. And that way you have a bit more control of how much goes where. It's easier to blend in so you don't have a bunch of harsh lines. But at this point, it is still an underpainting, so it doesn't really matter. But it gives it if you just want to put a light, like a glaze over it of a shadow. Sometimes you want hard shadows and sometimes you want really soft shadows. The ear is a good example. There's some hard shadows in there where you want your paintbrush to have thicker color and you just want to put a hard line. But then if you just want soft shadows, you just water it down a bit and you let your paintbrush glide the color on. Okay, so here I'm starting to go over it with the colors that I mixed that I thought were really good skin tone colors. And I'm just going over the whole thing with it it's like a mixed in with a bit of water just to get the greenish color out of there, the green yellow, so he doesn't look so jaundiced. And we could still see everything that we did, so we can go back over that, and it'll also soften up all the shadows that we did in the eye area, and it'll make it easier to lighten everything up. So at this point, I didn't really like that color, and I think I'm going over it with the blue. I'm not quite sure why I'm doing this. I think I just hated that color. Maybe I thought it would cool it down a bit. I don't know. I mean, I guess it got rid of the green. I don't know. Now it looks really gray. It made it look really gray. I mean, at some point I give up on this whole thing and I just start painting how I normally do, and you'll see that. But I wanted to show that sometimes, we try to do something else and try new things, and it doesn't work out the way we plan. And then we just kind of, like, I kind of start this painting over, but I don't. I just use what I already have, and you'll see that. And sometimes, like, I've heard people that have a painting and they're like, I just want to throw it away and start over. Well, you can start over from what you already have. It actually makes it easier than starting completely over, and you'll see that through this painting. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to fill in a lot of those values that I washed over. So now I'm trying to put in the highlights with that color that I mixed. It just never really looks good. I think another thing is that I didn't, when I did the darker things, I think I just used purple and blues instead of mixing that color with the purples and blues or different, like, browns or something to get the different shades. I didn't do that. Either way, you'll be able to tell how I get aggravated and I get these angry brush strokes. I'm just not happy with it. Yeah, so at this point, I'm really hating it, and I'm not paying much attention to the photograph. I'm just trying to, I'm looking at the color and I'm not liking it, so I end up just painting over everything, going, oh, this is terrible. What am I doing? I'm just going to throw it in the trash. But I keep going with it because I also know that sometimes if you don't like something, you keep moving forward and it'll end up looking fabulous. So I do keep moving forward because I also know if I'm going to paint over this with different colors, I want the colors that I already have down to be consistent um, with the highlights and the shadows because they'll show through because acrylics can be pretty transparent depending on how thick you use them. So I keep going with it for now. I mean, even he looks sick of it. Just look at him. He's like, "What are you doing? What is this?" He's just sick of your shit. And the right eye just looks terrible. Just, but I'm just keep going with the highlights, knowing I'll fix it later. I even watched a bunch of videos on how to mix skin tones, and I was like, okay, I'm totally ready for this. I'm gonna mix my own colors. And I don't know, it just he looks like maybe he has leprosy or something. I don't know. They're just terrible. They turned out terrible. This is why I paint right out of the tube. It's like I'll add some white or something to lighten the color, but I don't mix colors. So if you hate mixing colors too, then we're on the same page. See, so now I'm just trying to soften up everything so I can harden it up again, but not have so much. And I totally messed it up right there. This is me angry painting right now. I'm just totally angry about it. Just totally over it. I'm sure we've all been there. We have something that's just not going how you thought, and you're just disgusted with it, and you're still painting, and you're like, why am I even doing this? This is terrible. Trying to get his nose again. The way that he's facing, it's not an easy direction to paint because like the eye on the right is very different than the eye on the left as far as if you really break down every little shape that's in that eye. And it's the same thing with the nose. And I struggle with it a bit, but we managed to get it Sometimes you just have to keep messing with stuff. And then once you get it right, just don't mess with it anymore. He looks like a ghost. Like, what did I do on the right? It looks like he has the tears for every person he killed or something. I don't know what that was all about. Like, and I'm still painting it. There's some point right after this that I stop and I wait a couple days and then I go back to it. And sometimes you just have to do that because when I did that, I decided that I wasn't going to try to mix my own colors. I'm just going to paint it the way I want to paint it and how I normally paint because that's just my style, and it ends up a lot better. I end up really taking my energy back for this painting. I think a lot of us do that. Like if we watch a tutorial and you try to paint just like the painters painting their tutorial and yours ends up nothing like it and you get kind of frustrated and you're like, oh my God, this really sucks. But a lot of times, you can't, you follow somebody and you try to paint like them, but you just can't paint like them because you have your own style. It's in there somewhere. You just have to find out what it is. And this is pretty much how mine would be if I tried to paint like somebody else. Because that's what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to mix my own colors and it's just not working out. All right, so today is the new day. And I started with the background and decided I didn't like it. It was too dull. It looked like a rainy day. So I wanted to brighten it up a bit. And I started with that first. So we're basically going to paint this whole thing all over and just use this as a template. You see, I have some like a medium blue and a bit of yellow and some white in there. And I just put it all on the paintbrush and let it blend itself as I go. So yeah, this was 2 days later from the previous painting that we just watched. And I think I'm just starting over with the dark blue, putting in some shadows first. And coming in with some yellow for the the highlights. It's more of a like a mid-tone yellow probably. So it's not the highlight, it's more of the light is here, but you'll see me go over it again with an even lighter color. And this is the new underpainting. This is how I pretty much normally paint, with colors just straight out of the tube. This is a like a lime green color, and I'm doing this for the major highlights. And I want to make sure I get that color all over so his skin tone is the same tone. And now I'm going back over with some blue for shadowing. And now I'm using an orange, and that is like it's not a dark shadow color, but it's like right next to a deeper, like if you had a deep shadow and then you had just a little bit of shadow next to it, that would be what color this is for. This is the orange. So it's kind of like that color value. It's a darker color, but it's not quite a shadow. And I know it looks terrible and all that kind of stuff, but what it is it's exaggerating those little shadows so that, because this is an underpainting, so when you go back over it, you'll still see the little imprint of these colors. And that's why I do these, just totally over exaggerate everything. And I pick colors just based on their value. So it's not a shadow color, but it's also not a highlight color. It's kind of in between those. Now I'm just adding in that yellow, which is really weird because the other yellow, when we did before, made him look really jaundiced, but this one looks just cartoony. It's kind of weird how different yellows do different things. Okay, so this color is like it's very similar to the orange color. It's a shadow color, but it's also like a backlighting color as if there was some light coming in. And really it's the same value as the orange color, but it's just going to give it more interest when it comes through the next layers because you'll see the orange and the pink coming through it. You can see in the finished painting up above, you kind of see those colors, but you don't see them like how you're looking at them right now while I'm painting them. So this color that I'm using now it's just light pink right out of the tube. And the way it looks over these other colors layers, it looks way more skin tone than the other colors I tried to mix myself. So you can see on the palette on the right, there's the color straight out of the tube, and then next to it I have a little bit of water, and I just use that based on where I'm painting it and how thick I want that color. If I want it thinner, I add more water to it, and if I want it thicker, I just go straight for the color. So I'll use this color in the highlights pretty much straight from the tube. And then when I put it over some of the shadowing, I'll have more water on my brush for that so that the color is there, but you can still see a lot of the shadowing underneath it. And that really helps to soften up all those colors together. So see, I'm using this as a highlight color, and I'm just looking at the photograph and I'm putting it in where really thick where the major highlights are, and then I thin it out as I go into shadows, parts that have shadows. And I know this looks terrible right now, but trust me, even at this point, I'm thinking it's way better than it was the 2 days before when I was working on it. Just because I know from experience where this can go, whereas the other one, I just was not feeling it. So the ear here was down a little further. So I'm just trying to raise it up a bit, and that's why it looks very thick as far as where the highlights are. But later when I go over the painting with another tone, like the shadow color, I'll thin that down again. So this I took the orange, I mixed it in with a little bit of that light pink just to lighten it up a bit. And I'm going back over those mid-tone shadow colors. We're going to start building some definition in the face here. Now here you see I'm bringing up the shadow higher in the ear to move it up more. Now I pretty much painted over most of the beard, so I'm going to put some of it back in there, so just so I know where it's at. If any of you are around my age, so around 50, maybe older, this part right here reminds me of that show Sanford and Son. Did you ever watch that? It totally looks like the dad. I don't, I don't know why, it just made me laugh. So since I put that color in the beard, I'm gonna go and put it in the top hair too, because you want to make sure whatever color you put in the beard, you put on top. just so it doesn't look too off. This is still, most of this stuff will be painted over. But I'm going to try to define the braids a bit here. And I'm making them a little bit taller because I didn't really make them that tall. Most of this color is going to be covered up, but some of it'll peek through and it gives it a lot of interest. You just see that little bright colors peeking through. You can kind of see it in the finished photo in the upper right. So even when you put down a bright color, you think it's really clowny, but when you keep painting over it and over it, it adds a bit more interest to your paintings and value in the colors. Since we're not mixing colors, we're just putting colors over colors over colors. And that is the same light green color that I'm using as a highlight. Now I'm going back over shadows with the pinks. So that's one of the colors where you go over the deepest shadows, but then you can also use that for the next value of shadow above that. And here I'm trying to use it to get the little eyelid crease that I'll define more when I put more highlights on there. I haven't repainted over the actual eye at all, so this is the part where I'm doing that from the last messed up painting. Okay, so here he has hazel eyes, and I just go over the whole thing with the green because they're light colored eyes. And so I'm just going to use that as a base, and we'll end up, I'll let it dry as I go work on other areas, and then I'll go back over it with different colors. Right now he looks like he'll shoot lasers out of his eyes. He's possessed. So this is the light pink color again. So I'm basically using this as a highlight color. And then if I want to soften any of the darker colors next to it, I'll just use a bit of water with it. But right now I'm mostly just taking just the color, just the paint, and putting it in as highlights. Okay, here's the tiny eyeliner brush I was telling you about. And I'm using it's probably ultramarine blue. And I'm just using it to try to define those really fine, deep shadows. And if you want to do really good lines, you have to make sure that your paint has a bit of water mixed in it so it flows nicely. And you can see there I kind of blotched it, kind of just like I do when I put on my own eyeliner. I use liquid eyeliner and I get little blotches. That's exactly what I did. But that's okay. We're still going to go with it. And I can go use the same brush, just clean it and go over it with the light color again once it's dried. I know at this point it looks like it's too much, that color. It looks like he's wearing eyeliner, but you'll see once we start putting in the color on other places, it actually tones down the deep colors that you put in. And now I'm starting to use purple because I like to use blue and purple. And I'm going around the eye because if you look at an eye, usually his do anyway, around the edges there's a darker color. And then it goes light and then it goes dark again. So I'm just putting those kind of values in it, and we'll go back and add even more color in a bit. Now, at the time when I was doing this, I noticed it after, but I'll tell you now that I made the eyes. The eyes are too big. They're they're very cartoonish big. But at the time, I was more into these colors and getting these shadows and light and stuff like that inside of there. But I do fix it, and you'll see that because it's pretty important if you're doing a portrait of an actual person. I mean, yeah, it looks good, but it's not that person. You really want it to look like that person. So I do end up fixing it and tweaking it a bit later, and I'll point that out to you when I do that. It really wasn't that hard. Like you would think, oh my God, the eyes are messed up, but I'm not going to do anything because it'll be too hard. But it's really not. It's not that hard to fix. If your eyes are too big and you want to make them smaller, you think it's a hard thing to do, but it's not, and I'll show you that. I also end up fixing the ear, and the nose is not exactly right, and then the shape of his face on the right isn't right. I fix that too. Okay, so now I'm going back and fixing the little blotches that I did. And also, you can really thin out the dark lines at this point using the lighter color that sits next to those dark lines. And I'm using this as a highlight because if you look underneath the eyes, there's the bottom lids have that really pronounced highlight right where the lid meets the eye. Now here I'm adding some white, and it's not white, it's white mixed in with a bit of blue, and it's still very, very, very bright, but I know I'm going to tone it down, and I'll also use that same color just a bit in other places because I have my grandma in my head telling me if you're going to paint and use the color in one place, you have to make sure you use it in at least two other places. So I do that. I'll put some on the nose and the ear, some in the hair. Okay, here I'm going in with some pink and I'm just softening up those lines, the blue and purple lines that I made, so they're not so harsh. It also softens up the eyelid so it's not so in your face light. I'm just putting in some more shadow in the beard. I was not sure what I was going to do with the beard, but every once in a while I go in and put something else in there. Can you see how the orange and the pink under the nose, it's like a shadow, but it still has a lot of definition and color in there with that with those purples and blues. I'm still using the tiny brush and I'm just putting some like indications of eyebrows. So this is the purple watered down a bit. Just filling in some shadows by the beard. Also, when you do eyes, a lot of the times, the way that you could see it in the picture to the left of the close-up of the face, the light is coming down and there's a shadow from the upper lid that goes on to the eye. I think I mentioned this before, that a lot of people forget about that shadow and it's from the top lid onto the eyeball. And sometimes if you could do a lot of shading and stuff, and people forget that, and that'll make their painting look very cartoonish. So you don't want to forget those shadows. I know sometimes it's hard to go over an eye that you paint when you're working on all those colors and stuff, but because you don't want to mess it up, but you'll see that it'll really bring your painting to life. And here I'm trying to go into the braid where I think those shadows are, and just to really build it up. Okay, this was the next day, which is why my painting, when I do the videos, I speed them up because I can't paint in like an hour like some people do. But I realized that the eyes were too big, and so I'm gonna start smushing things down. And right now I'm using the light pink, and I'm just kind of shaving off and shaving off. I mean, I also have to go just totally over that line on the eyes because I need to move those down. Maybe that isn't this part. I don't know. We'll see. I also speed up most of the videos. The clips are they're anywhere from 200 to 600 times faster. So I do not paint this fast. I wish I did. Yeah, so here I'm shaving off a bit of the right side because I had that out too far. The ear was also down too far, so I'm raising it up. I'm starting to put shadows in there, and I'm going to raise the ear up. And if you have Photoshop or you kind of know how to use it or something like it, I think there's some free things that are very similar, like GIMP. I don't know if they're still around, but what I did was I took a picture, I took a photograph of the painting, and then I took the picture that I made of him, and I overlaid it, and then I made the photograph opaque so I could see what was wrong because I knew that there was stuff wrong with it, and that was how I was able to tell that I made the eyes too big and the ears weren't quite right and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, we have technology now, and if you know how to use it, um, definitely get yourself familiar and try that out because it helps a lot just to tweak your painting, and you can make little tweaks that'll make a huge difference. Also making the hair bigger. It wasn't as big as the photograph. And then make sure I add that color in the beard. So I'm putting highlights on the braided part. I never really painted braids like that before, so I was kind of just winging it. I think overall it turned out pretty good. Okay, so here I'm reshaping the nose a bit. I also needed to move up the bottom lip because it was down way too far. The whole mouth was down way too far, I think. You can also, there's some apps that you can use, like I think it's called DaVinci. I think it's only for iPhones, but you could take a photo and make it opaque on top of something that you're painting. So what you do is you upload the photo, and like I would hold it in front of this painting, and you have to hold it really still though. But then sometimes you could tell by using apps like that. It's a really good app. I actually paid for it. I have to use a tripod though, because I'll use it to sketch out things sometimes too. But you need to put it on a tripod, and you when you're sketching, you have to look through the phone, and so it's kind of it's a bit awkward, but it's kind of neat, especially if you need to go back and see, make sure that everything's in the right place. Or if you use the tracing paper method of transferring, you could hold that over the painting again to see if you kept your lines where they're supposed to be, because it's really easy to paint over stuff and get things not exactly where they are. You could always look at where things are in conjunction to other things. Like if you look at the photograph on the left where the top of his ear sits, it's pretty parallel with the eye. And then where the nose is based on the eyes and the mouth, and where the bottom of the ear is based on the mouth. You always look at those kind of things when you're painting faces. So here it looks like I was using purple. Now I switched to blue, just giving it some more shadows. So here I'm putting in some yellow because he has very hazel eyes. I think I threw in some green in there. I don't know, I kept adding color until I got it the way I liked it. And then that's like the little the shiny on the eyes. Yeah, I don't think I moved the eyes yet. I don't think I missed that part. I don't know. I'm still reshaping the nose here. And this is still the same light pink color I've been using. I'm using a shadow color to define the mouth a little more. And there I was just toning down the eyes so they don't look like they have those really big white around it. So at this point, I can't really finish the beard until the shirt is done because the beard goes over the shirt. So I had to stop working on everything else and work on the shirt for a bit. And I sped this up pretty fast because I didn't put much detail into it. Uh, I mean, I probably could have, but it's not like a still life painting. It's you know, if I wanted to paint this really super accurate and make it look really super real, then I would have taken the time and added a bunch of details to the shirt. But it's more of a an impression of the photograph instead of me actually painting it lifelike. So right now I'm just painting this kind of like an underpainting, and I'm getting the just trying to get a basic of different values that are in there. And I don't paint all the details, but I'll go over it with some darks and lights, and then I end up making the whole thing brown, like a brownish color. I haven't really painted fabric that much, and I don't really like to paint fabrics because of the folds and things like that. But I have a Facebook group that I started for paintings, and if the sun ever comes out, I don't know, for the last few days of it, I have lemons, and I wanted to take a photograph of the sun on top of white fabric with a lemon on top because then you'll get a bunch of folds and the lemon will disperse light, you know, like reflections on the white fabric. And I thought it would be an interesting study for painting fabrics and folds and light that casts off of something else. Plus, you have the texture of the lemon. But the sun has not been out for 3 days. I live in Florida, and the day that I bought the lemons, it has been cloudy ever since. So I'm patiently waiting for the sun to come out, and I keep checking. And as soon as it does, I'm going to run out there and get my photograph because it's supposed to be rainy for like a week. So hopefully the lemons will still be good by the time I do that. But If you'd like to join me in some little studies of different things, uh, I'll put a link on my Facebook page, the Crone Tevis, and you should be able to find it and join. I tried to find a picture on the internet of just a lemon on some white fabric, and I found a couple pictures, but they weren't really like, like maybe the texture of the fabric was weird, and I didn't want something with a whole bunch of texture. I want to keep it simple, and I couldn't find anything, so I'm like, well, I'm just gonna have to take my own picture, I guess, which is okay. It's a simple enough picture. I just need some sunlight. Oh, I guess now I'm going back to the eye. So this is where I'm starting to make the eyes smaller. I guess I don't know. I just stop. I was probably regretting doing it because that's a scary thing if you need to adjust eyes, but this was the part where I did make them smaller, and the left side was way too out there too far too. So let's see, I'm trying to totally get rid of that line because that needs to be moved to where the bottom line is. That's actually where the top line should be, somewhere around there. It's really hard to keep proportions the same. And I know I've seen a lot of people, they when they do portraits, they do the eyes real big because we just like big eyes as human beings. I don't know what it is. And then the ears will be really small. And, we don't really like ears, so we always paint those smaller. Whereas ears are actually, like his ears, he's got man ears and they're pretty big. And when you're painting it, you're like, wow, are his ears really this big? You know, you don't realize how big ears can be. And so you tend to, like, if you draw somebody, you make them smaller, but really the ears are not as small as you think they are. Which is why when you look at something, you need to look at it at, you need to look at shapes, like what are all the shapes that you see in that part. The ear has a lot of shapes in it. And then you start looking at details, and then you start realizing how big it is, where it is in conjunction with the mouth and the nose and the eyes. And that helps you get a good scale of where things should be. Okay, so I'm raising it up right here. I'm raising the bottom lid up. And these are just going a little bit at a time. And now I'm filling in the edge of that eye because it's too wide. So now I'm trying to carefully repaint that shadow that's right above his eyelid. So there I put just a little bit of white in there just to define that edge again. I need to make the whole round circle a bit smaller. They're too big. And there I'm adding it other places, Grandma. Okay, so now I'm going back to the shirt. And sometimes you want to let things dry, so you work on something else, and then you got to let that dry, so then you go back to the other thing. So at some point I decided just to make it brown, and most of it is just a wash. I went over all the details I already did, and then I went over it again. And that's kind of one of the things I really like about acrylics is that you can paint something, and if you don't like the color, it's easy enough to change without even losing all the work that you did. You can just wash over it and let that dry and add more stuff in. And then that turquoise color or whatever it is, I think it's like a hunter green or sap green. I think it's sap green with some other shades, and those colors still come through, so it's kind of neat. And now I'm just putting in a lighter color wherever I think the light would hit a bit, which apparently is all over, which it kind of is in the photograph. And now I'm using a purple. I'm just going to go over some of the shadows and details. I'm just adding some highlights just to make it look like fabric, kind of folds and stuff. I'm not very good at that. Something I need to practice a bit more on. Okay, so now I can finish the beard now that I'm happy with the shirt. And I'm using the tiny eyeliner brush again. I'm going in there with looks like purple. Just to give it some more shadows before I add the lighter colors. I think I gave up on the little brush and went with a bigger one. This is I think it's a flat brush. I use the flat brush a lot. It's my favorite. Yeah, this is a dark gray that I'm using right now. And I'm putting that in the hair too. Make sure it's the same color. So I didn't really use any browns in the hair. Those are like what color did we use? We used lime green, ultramarine blue, probably violet purple, and now I'm going over it with a dark gray. I'm pretty sure that's exactly what it's called. You can see it to the right, a little tube of dark gray. And now I'm using violet purple for more shadowing. Adding a bit of that color into the eyebrows. And now I'm starting with the, I believe that's parchment. It's not a white, it's called parchment. So it's just like, it's kind of like a white, but it's just off a bit. And one thing I realize at this point is that beards aren't, his beard in particular isn't really all straight. So I did try to put some wavy lines in there. But then as I kept painting over it, I lost those wavy lines, and I really should have kept those in there. But it still looks pretty good. See here the little wavy lines I added. That's just violet washed down a bit. Oh yeah, I'm fixing the shadow because his face isn't really the shape that his face actually is. So I'm trying to bring the shadow to the left up a bit and inward because before it looked too round. You can see it in the photograph of the left. He's got more shadow, and it kind of made that hard line. I don't know. It must have been the water did that, and I tried to fix that after it dries a bit. Sometimes if you get your paint too watery, you just have to let it dry before you can fix what it did. Which acrylics really, even if it's watery, they don't take that long to dry. It's like a few minutes. It's dry enough. See, I softened out that line. I'm just adding more of the color, and that's the light pink color. Just softening up everything. At this point, the painting's almost done. I think I just do a little bit more to the beard, add some shadows. Just putting the last touches on it here. So you saw how terrible it was and how I went through and decided to save it, and it made a huge difference. So if you get discouraged with your work, don't worry about it. You can always just use that as a jumping off platform to redo it. Anything can be fixed. So here I'm using the tiny brush again, and I'm using a mixture of the parchment with titanium white, and I'm just putting in a bunch of little tiny squigglies, and then I'll go over it again with a darker color. And if the squiggly is like really too big, like a blotch, like there's a couple blotches you could see, then I'll go over it with a darker color, like the dark gray or the violet, and you kind of cross over it or go real close next to it, and it'll make those it'll tone that down a bit and make it look more like hair. I mean, I don't think I got this part exactly right where the beard starts on his chin. It probably should have been down a little bit more now that I look at it, after I've already done it, but it still looks pretty good. It still looks like him. See, that was parchment though, so I remembered what the color was. Parchment. It's like an eggshell color, but more gray. And then I'm just going to add little lines up here just so it looks like hair. And I kind of go crisscross right here since it's a braid, and braids usually have hair going in different directions. So now I'm going over with a darker color and softening up some of those hard, thicker lines that I made. Adding those in the shadows. And don't forget the eyebrows. There, I just add a bit of that shadow I was talking about on the upper eyelid. That gives the shadow onto the eyeball. Because I probably painted over that with some color. Now I'm adding more color, adding the little eye glistening. Oh, I added a little, I think that's deep magenta. Kind of looks like red, but I don't know if it's just the lighting. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing. It looks like I'm using it to darken up the light pink a bit. Trying to put a shadow on that side of the nose, just a very slight one. Here, I'm pretty sure I'm using, it's hard to tell because the picture's so tiny, but using violet to put some more shadows. And I know at some point I end up just using I wait for it to dry and use a bigger brush with the violet and having it watered down a bit, and I just brush it on the left side of the beard to give the shadow, which you could see it in the upper right. I messed with it so much I just lost the little squigglies that it had. So I started by trying to use a tiny brush and decided that's probably not going to be enough to do the shadow that I wanted to do. So here I'm going in with a bigger brush and just washing in those shadows. And now I'm just going to go over to the lighter parts where the light is hitting. It's a bit of the parchment white. Maybe the light's hitting some of the strands over there. And we are getting to the end. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you learned something. I know that people probably won't follow through with painting this. You don't want to paint a who wants to paint a picture of my husband, right? But I hope you learned something. If you want to try your own hand at a portrait. And thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.